Picture Seattle's skyline without its most famous landmark. No slender tower piercing the sky, no flying saucer perched 600 feet above the city, just the modest silhouette of a Pacific Northwest port town, unremarkable and forgettable. In 1959, that's exactly what Seattle was, a city desperately searching for an identity, overshadowed by San Francisco and Los Angeles, known mainly for rain and Boeing factories. Then, in a Stuttgart hotel restaurant, a Seattle businessman named Eddie Carlson picked up a napkin and sketched something that would change everything. A crude drawing he later described as more of a lollipop than anything else. A needle-thin tower crowned with what looked like a landed UFO. That napkin doodle would become the Space Needle, but getting from sketch to reality would require building the impossible in just 400 days. In 1955, Washington's governor had tapped Eddie Carlson, a charismatic hotel executive, to explore hosting a World's Fair in Seattle. By 1959, Carlson realized the fair needed more than just pavilions. It needed a symbol that would capture the world's imagination. The inspiration struck during that business trip to Germany. While visiting Stuttgart's television tower with its revolving restaurant perched above the city, Carlson had his epiphany. Back in his hotel restaurant, he grabbed a napkin and sketched his vision, a slender spire topped by a flying saucer. Returning to Seattle, Carlson shared his sketch with the fair organizers. The response was polite but skeptical. Building such a tower would be expensive, technically challenging, and the city had no money to fund it. By 1960, Carlson found an ally in John Graham Jr., a prominent architect who assembled a design team to transform the crude sketch into reality. But turning a napkin doodle into architectural plans proved surprisingly difficult. Graham's team produced design after design, some resembling a landed UFO, others looking like a tethered balloon or cocktail shaker. None captured the right balance. Months passed, the fair's opening loomed closer. In August 1960, Graham brought in Victor Steinbrueck, a respected architect working for just $5 an hour. One evening at home, Steinbrueck found himself staring at a piece of abstract art, a wooden sculpture called The Feminine One, depicting a dancing woman with an elegant, constricted waist. Suddenly, Steinbrueck saw the answer. He sketched a bold new concept, a tower with a wasp-waisted hourglass figure, slender legs flaring into a tripod base, narrowing dramatically at the midsection, then expanding into a saucer-shaped crown. Racing to his wife, Steinbrueck burst out, "I've got it, the idea that they'll take for the tower." He was right. The dancing sculpture had inspired Seattle's space-age totem. With a winning design in his hand by late 1960, Carlson faced his next impossible challenge, finding someone to pay for it. The city of Seattle wasn't interested, and neither was King County. If the space-age tower was going to rise, it would need private money, a massive gamble on an untested design for a fair that might flop. 5 bold Seattle businessmen stepped forward, forming the Pentagram Corporation. Contractor Howard S. Wright, architect John Graham Jr., financiers Bagley Wright and Ned Skinner, and timber magnate Norton Clapp. But they still needed land. After an anxious search, they found their only option, a tiny 120-foot by 120-foot square where an old fire station had once stood. The Space Needle had literally come down to the last available lot. On April 17, 1961, crews broke ground with barely 13 months until the fair's opening. The first challenge was immediate. How do you anchor a 600-foot tower on Seattle's notoriously soft soil? The solution required an engineering feat that would set a West Coast record. Workers excavated a pit 30 feet deep, then prepared for the largest continuous concrete pour ever attempted in the western United States. In a single day, 467 cement trucks formed a convoy across Seattle. For 12 straight hours, concrete flowed without stopping, 5,850 tons in total. When it hardened, engineers had achieved something remarkable. The Space Needle's center of gravity sat just 5 feet above the ground. This massive anchor would keep the tower upright no matter how hard Seattle's winds might blow. Above the foundation, the graceful tripod of steel began to rise. Every day brought new challenges. The tower's slender wasp waist had to support not just the observation deck, but the world's first revolving restaurant in a freestanding tower. Workers raced against time and weather, often wielding joints high above the city as Seattle's rain pelted in their faces. By December 8, 1961, just 8 months after breaking ground, workers topped off the steel frame at its full 605-foot height. In the final weeks, painters applied the Space Needle's eye-catching color scheme: astronaut white for the legs, orbital olive for the core, re-entry red for the halo, and galaxy gold for the roof. On April 21, 1962, opening day of the Century 21 exposition, the Space Needle officially welcomed its first paying visitors. Eddie Carlson's Napkin sketch had become the tallest building west of the Mississippi. When the Space Needle first opened, Seattle held its breath. Local columnists dubbed it a pickle on a pedestal, or complained it looked like a UFO on stilts. But those early critics were quickly overwhelmed by pure public fascination. During the 6 months of the fair, the Space Needle drew an astonishing 2.3 million visitors. The tower became a magnet for celebrities: Walt Disney, astronaut John Glenn, Vice President Lyndon Johnson, and Elvis Presley, who filmed romantic scenes in the restaurant for his 1963 movie, It Happened at the World's Fair. The Space Needle's greatest moment came on July 23, 1962, when it served as a backdrop for the first live transatlantic satellite television broadcast to 200 million viewers worldwide. Almost overnight, Seattle's image was transformed from a rainy Pacific Northwest port to a space city where the future was being built. But as the decades passed, the Space Needle faced unexpected challenges. On October 1988, a fire broke out at the restaurant kitchen. In 1989, a television hoax convinced thousands the tower had collapsed, flooding emergency phone lines with panic calls. Lightning struck it twice in the same evening in 2017, creating dramatic photos against the stormy sky. More dramatic was a challenge from its co-creator. In the 1970s, Victor Steinbrueck, the architect who had solved the tower's design crisis, led a passionate campaign against a second restaurant that would alter his elegant creation. Despite his opposition, the city approved the addition in 1982. The irony was profound. The architect who had saved the Space Needle's design had failed to save it from modification. Yet Seattle had learned to love its Space Needle, not despite its quirks, but because of them. As the city evolved into a tech hub in the 1990s, the Space Needle's status only grew. In 1999, Seattle officially designated it as a landmark, recognizing it as an embodiment of American aspiration towards technological prowess. In 2017, the tower underwent its most dramatic transformation yet, a $100 million renovation that removed metal safety cages and installed the world's first rotating glass floor. Visitors could now look straight down through the floor as it slowly spun, watching the ground 500 feet below. Today, as millions of visitors ride those same 41-second elevators to the top, few think about the Napkin sketch that started it all. They don't consider the 467 cement trucks or the desperate race against time that nearly doomed the project. What they see is something that has transcended its origins, a tower that no longer looks futuristic but has become timeless. The Space Needle that opened in 1962 was meant to symbolize the 21st century, but as the real 21st century arrived, something remarkable happened. The tower didn't become a relic of outdated optimism. Instead, it evolved into something more precious, a monument to the power of audacious dreams. Eddie Carlson's crude lollipop sketch has welcomed over 60 million visitors. It has survived earthquakes, lightning strikes, and the occasional prankster. The tower that skeptics dismissed as a flying saucer on stilts had become Seattle's most beloved symbol, as essential to the city's identity as the mountains that surround it. When flights approach Seattle, passengers crane their necks to spot the familiar silhouette. When earthquakes shake the Pacific Northwest, residents instinctively look toward the Space Needle, reassured by its steady presence. When the city celebrates, the Space Needle lights up the sky with fireworks, transforming into a 605-foot celebration. From a desperate city's search for identity to a global icon of innovation, the Space Needle's journey mirrors Seattle's own transformation. Both learned that sometimes the most outrageous dreams turn out to be the most necessary ones. Eddie Carlson passed away in 1990, but his Napkin sketch lives on, not just in steel and concrete, but in the proof that a single bold idea can change a city forever. The Space Needle stands today as a reminder that the future belongs to those bold enough to sketch it on a napkin and determined enough to build it in just 400 days. In a world full of architectural marvels, Seattle's Space Needle remains unique. the only landmark born from a doodle that dared to reach for the stars, and somehow, against all odds, managed to touch them. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to support the channel, please like and subscribe. That stuff really helps the channel out. And if you have a friend that you think would also like this video, please feel free to send it their way. If you have any video topics you'd like us to cover in the future, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.